right. Hey, everybody. I'm Geordie Carswell. I'm a co-founder and CMO here at ActualTech Media. We're incredibly excited to have you with us today and very grateful that you were able to join us. I'm super stoked about this session. It's going to be incredibly informative for all of our clients and prospective clients, and we hope you enjoy it. So we'll tap over to our next slide and get rolling here as soon as we can. So just as a way of, by way of housekeeping and a few agenda items, Heather is going to walk us through all things integrated marketing, how to build a campaign, how to define what integrated marketing even is, and figure it out. The timelines involved, all of these things are going to be tremendously informative for you, and it's going to be a fast-paced session. We know you're going to enjoy it. Afterward, we're going to take your questions. So if you have a question as the webinar proceeds, please go ahead and pop it into the question Q&A widget on your screen, and we'll take your questions as they come in, and then at the end we'll consider the questions with Heather and get her feedback from the trenches, so to speak. This is going to be an incredibly fast-moving session, and the deck is very dense because it's meant to be a resource for you. And so in the handout section, you'll find a copy of the deck. So please don't panic if if things move quickly. You'll be able to go through it afterward, but I think you'll find it the pace of things to be really enjoyable as we go. Then, of course, we're going to have a prize draw at the end of the webinar for the $300 Amazon gift card. And to top it off, when you leave and after the webinar, there is an exit survey that we're hoping you could fill in for us and tell us a little bit about what you thought of today's session and what your challenges and needs are. So we look forward to that very much. So I'm ready to kick it off and introduce Heather Garcia-Meza. Here she is. She looks just like a picture. It's amazing. Hi, Heather. We're so excited to have you. You've been a longtime client of ours, and we've often run our services and ideas past you in the past for great feedback, and we're so excited to have you share your perspective with us. So I'm going to shut up and let you take it away here. Go for it, Heather.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Geordie. I'm super excited to be here. Helping marketers is one of my most favorite things to do, and being able to talk to your audience about things that I'm passionate about and the knowledge I have and being able to share that, beyond exciting. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I also just, wanted to acknowledge the fact that it's the end of a very hard month for a lot of us. January's been really, really tough from a marketing perspective. Whenever the economy gets a little bumpy, marketing definitely feels it very, very much. We're kind of in the back of the roller coaster. Sometimes we get whipped around. And so there's a lot of us out there that have either been impacted in terms of layoffs personally, or know people, or are survivors and having to also figure out how to do things without the resources that we not only enjoyed, but also our friends. So big hugs to everybody out there. And just want to say, if you're thinking about reaching out to anyone, do it. Even if they weren't impacted and there's someone who's still having to kind of make it happen, just reach out and say, hey, hi, I heard your company. Ooh, we're thinking about you. People really do appreciate it. It makes a big, big difference. So with that, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to build an integrated marketing plan. I am a very fast talker and I have a tremendous amount of information to share with you. And so I've created a deck based on that is very, very robust and rich and packed full of information. It's not necessarily intended to always be consumed live in the meeting. So we've made the deck available for you in the handouts. So don't feel like you have to, take notes or screenshots or things like that. You can download these. They're available for you. As mentioned, this is also being recorded, so you can always come back and look at things later if you need to. So with that, I'm going to just jump right in here. But first, what the heck is an integrated marketing campaign, right? I mean, it's one of those terms, like a lot of terms, that gets thrown around a lot and we all think it means something. But what does it really mean today in the context of what we're talking about? Well, my friend Google pulled up this really, really great definition by Campaign Monitor. And so I've put this in here. And I've highlighted the areas of this definition that I think are the most important to acknowledge about an integrated marketing campaign. And that is that it combines multiple channels and it is so you can promote a consistent message to a specific audience and hopefully ultimately convert them into something. Ultimately, we all want our customers. And so that ends up being the end result most of the time. And that's one of the reasons I think this is a great definition. I also, though, want to kind of elaborate on this myself, and I'm going to, um, oops, I'm going to share with you one of my campaigns that really kind of walks through what an integrated B2B marketing campaign looks like when you take it from a full funnel perspective and you're really looking at it not just in terms of messaging that you want to push out and talk about ourselves. In a lot of these campaigns, we're talking about ourselves, but really a campaign that is focused on helping people move through their journey by giving them the information and the messaging and the content that you have, the value you have to offer that helps them kind of move through that journey. So I've got this great example that I'm going to use as a way of teaching and breaking things down. But before I dive into that, I also wanted to make sure that I talked about what a funnel is, right? And so when I talk about a funnel, I have a little DNA diagram I use over here on the left or right, depending upon if this is flipped, that shows really those basic elements of a funnel. And again, this diagram is something I reference and I've placed it in here for you to take a look at later. I'm not going to walk through the entire funnel and the aspects of it, but really this highlights those very, very basic areas from a marketing perspective of what we're trying to do when we think about a funnel. And the funnel, again, is our perspective. It's based on what we want to accomplish, right? We want to acquire people, we want to convert them, and we want to make them customers and then activate that and continue that process up and down the funnel. It's one of the reasons I don't use the traditional funnels. I feel like we really need to bake that into our DNA. And also because it goes up and down, right? People are not in a linear journey. They don't, say, I think I need to be converted. I hope a salesperson calls me, right? No, people are looking at things from their perspective, right? And so that's why it's really important if you want to have a full funnel approach that you think about it from that perspective, right? It means that your campaigns need to be contextual. They need to be contextual to your audience and what they're looking for and what they need. And then you've got to connect it up, as I mentioned, right? Leveraging your content to align it to their journey, what they're looking for. And then you use your calls to action and you align those to where they are in the journey, right? So what are they looking to do and how do you come in there and help them do it? And that's really that connection piece that is so critical to a full funnel approach. And then lastly, and definitely not least important, because if you don't do if you do everything and you don't do this last piece, no one's going to actually see all the great work you've done. Excuse me. And that is to make sure that you're focusing on how all of this is going to be consumed and how you're going to actually deliver it to your audience in a way that they're interested in and where they are looking for it, right? Where they are on their journey is where you need to be. And so these are kind of those high level definitions and approaches that I use when I talk about full funnel integrated marketing campaigns. And even most specifically, when I'm thinking about a tech buyer and a B2B audience, which is definitely where I have my sweet spot. And a lot of the examples I use are based on that. And the one I'm going to talk about today is specifically based on that. So thank you again for being here. And I want to have a greater understanding of the folks we have on today. It's a great audience already, I can see. But what's your experience personally, now that we've kind of talked about what an integrated marketing campaign is? What's your experience with building a campaign? Do you have no experience? You've never done it? You've got some experience. You've got tons of experience, but like all of us, you can still learn more. Oh, great. You guys are all starting to fill in your little spots here. Ooh, I hope you can see the little numbers moving. Maybe you can't. I might be able to see that just on my end, but I'm going to give you a few seconds more to answer the poll question. So what's your experience? Zero experience, none, some, or tons? All right. Oh, look at that. What an interesting mix. All right. I'm going to close the poll now. Everybody got their numbers in, or numbers, their selection in? Okay, awesome. Great. Here we go. Look at that. Oh my goodness. So what a great mix. We've got a few people, a few people that are very, very new to doing integrated campaigns, but most of you are right there in the middle, with a lot of you kind of, still have that deep expertise, but looking to do more. So this is great. This is really, really awesome. So I'm going to keep moving. And, again, for those of you who are, a little bit earlier in experience, if there are things that I say or jargon I use, feel free to put questions into the chat. And also, you'll be able to follow up with me after the webinar as well. We definitely want to keep folks moving. And the same thing goes actually for experts and in between. Any of you can do the same. But if I move a little bit too fast or get a little too extreme, let me know in the chat and I could slow it down, because I'm going to go right middle of the road based on where the bulk of our audience is. This is great. I love that we can do these kinds of things. Thank you. All right. So I think this is actually going to be extremely helpful for everyone, whether you're at the beginning of that range or, like I said, as an expert. I've created, excuse me, I've broken things down into 10 steps because, like everything, this is a very complex process. Building an integrated campaign sounds easy, right? Just pull out the crayon box and start drawing. Well, as we all know, it's a lot more complicated than we wish it was. And so I've tried to really break this down into 10 steps so that you can focus on each one of these as you build out your plan, or you can look at your existing plans and see where you can optimize and areas that maybe you haven't thought of before. All right. As I mentioned, there's a lot on this slide. These are the 10 steps. All 10 of them are listed here. I'm going to talk through really quick what each one of these are, but then I'm going to go deeper into each of these when we look at the actual plan I built for the example earlier on, and then talk to it a little bit more contextually with that example. Because I think, a lot of this, you could Google what is an integrated campaign like I did at the beginning, but, getting those examples and really understanding contextually how you apply it, I think is part of the thing that makes it most difficult for most of us to do these types of things. So the 10 steps are, not surprising, you've got to start with a specific business goal, right? So if you look at, the funnel and you think about what your goals are, are you trying to get brand awareness? Are you trying to do pipeline acceleration? Are you looking at, kind of, upselling to your installed base? These are the types of things that you first have to decide, this is what we need to do. And, you want to make sure that you're looking at that from the perspective of the business first, because ultimately it has to start with a business goal before any of the other pieces are going to align properly and get, at the very end, a business goal. So that's step number one. Step number two is aligning that to the funnel stage, as I mentioned earlier, right? If you are looking to, generate awareness, then you're not going to necessarily be focusing on, customers, right? Unless there's a very, specific thing you want them to make aware of. And then that becomes, why do you want to make them aware of that? And so you have to kind of keep going. Sometimes you hear the 5 whys, why, till you get to the real goal that you're trying to achieve. So understanding that business goal at a high level and then thinking about where it aligns to the funnel stage is how you get to that real goal that's going to actually be something you can align a objective around. And then the objective is specifically aligned to that funnel stage and that goal, right? Because a goal is kind of broad, but an objective is very specific, right? Because you're not necessarily, again, to use awareness as an example, you're not going to put a goal of meetings if your objective is to generate awareness, because that doesn't match, right? And so that's why you need to do those first 3 things and then think about what your strategy is going to be. How are you going to actually accomplish that objective? And, that's where the creative marketer really gets to come out and problem solve and think about things. And that's where you really want to make sure that you already have a way of listening to sales, that you're attending QBRs, that you're, interacting or at least just, lurking in Slack on the BDR channels, making sure that you have a real understanding of where their challenges are and what's making it difficult for them to be able to move things along or even just to get those meetings. Or if it's a little bit higher, that's where you have to do some other types of research as well. So if you start with the sales, you're going to be able to have a place to kind of work from. And I think that's the other piece of guidance I just want to really, really emphasize is that this is so much, it's so big. You have to start somewhere and then work your way from that one piece, whether it's looking at it from the perspective of the stage of the funnel or looking at a core piece of content that you want to create. So in determining your strategy, that's where you're going to really think about how you achieve that objective. But you need to understand who your audience is going to be first, right? Before you can start thinking of the specifics around that. And then from your audience, you're going to need to go to your content strategy, right? And so by step 5 or 6, you've got the basics of what you really, really need to make sure that you've got buy-in, right? So if you don't already have some level of buy-in from leadership and focus to go forward, you need to make sure that you even yourself don't get too far down this process without securing that level of buy-in. Because if you don't have the resources and people and the support, quite frankly, from the business to be able to do this, it's not going to work. And most of you already know that. So you want to make sure that you've got your business goal all the way through to your content strategy locked in, and then make sure you've got buy-in from your immediate leadership and key individuals. And then from that point, you can start working on your channels, right? And thinking about where your target's going to be and how you're going to promote them. And you'll have a better understanding of what level of support or prioritization your campaign can get within the business, and then building your campaign based on that. And, really making sure that you understand what else is going on outside of the business, or excuse me, not just outside of business, but I mean, outside of your little world too, right? Like live events, for example, are back, which is great. The example I'm going to walk through today doesn't leverage that because it was done at the beginning of the pandemic or mid-pandemic. And so, that's something to really factor in, right? When you're thinking about things like schedules and prioritization. The other aspect is really thinking about that collaboration piece, as I mentioned, and how you're going to effectively collaborate with the organization and making sure not just that you have that buy-in at the beginning, but that it's all the way through and it doesn't get lost along the way. And that your team is really set up for success, not just your immediate team, but, the cross-functional organizations that it takes to make things like this happen, and people outside in other teams, and not just marketing. But everyone that it takes to make this happen. And then lastly is making sure that you're measuring and you're optimizing. You want to make sure that you're measuring to learn, most importantly. Obviously, there are things that we have to measure for, kind of engine room metrics, so that we know that our platforms are working and doing well. But from a campaign perspective, you want to hyper focus on that objective that you're trying to achieve, and make sure that your metrics align to that and help you learn whether or not the campaign itself was successful, not just the tactics. One important thing I have in here, and it's down at the very bottom as a little bonus tip, is I wanted to really remind everyone that, it is important, even though I don't hyper focus on it in this example, to really think about the vendors and the technology that you have at your fingertips to leverage. They're especially helpful when it comes to expanding your audience and targeting not even just new people, but people within your database that you want to engage with and that you're trying to get contacts from. And there's lots and lots of resources out there from both a vendor perspective, ActualTech Media being one of them, but also from a technology perspective. And so really keep those things in mind, even though I'm not talking about them more specifically here in this campaign. All right, so the goal, objective, strategy, your targets, your KPIs. These things are extremely important, as I mentioned before. But, this example hyper focused in on accelerating pipeline. And what's triggered this for me is all of the feedback I was starting to hear from the business. I was, get invited to sales kickoff meetings, get invited to QBRs, go to the sales enablement meetings, even though they're at 7 a.m. Or 4 p.m. or whatever, right? Because they're global. But make the time to hear and listen to sales, because as a marketer, it is the number one way that you can get inspired from, an idea perspective, but also just in terms of, thinking about how you can, overcome certain challenges or take oftentimes messaging that is handed to us that just isn't quite working, or is so vague that it doesn't align to a specific action. And so you just need to come up with an idea that's going to help a specific problem, and you're going to get the support and the alignment you need so fast. It's amazing. And so that's what I did is I, honed in on the fact that we really needed to help sales accelerate the pipeline, and, get these folks moving again and actually start generating SQOs. And so the strategy that I designed was around promoting a core set of bottom of the funnel content, right? So again, pipeline acceleration. I'm not looking at, race car sponsorship. I'm looking at, how am I going to actually get these folks to want to take a meeting? How am I going to get them to become sales qualified opportunities? And so looking at it from that perspective and thinking about one of the messages that we were, kind of talking about was, all right, how do we take this, generalized concept of a return on investment, buy our solution, and, you're going to see a major return on your investment. And what is that message when it gets to the bottom of the funnel? And that's where, the machine started churning and the ideas came up. And it was, this concept around, you don't need new budget to buy what we're offering. And so what that meant was that I was able then to say, okay, based on, our opportunity and our database and our situation, right? There's a lot of analysis that goes into targeting. I believe we can get, a certain number of, sales qualified opportunities in Q4, but that we'll always be able to leverage the content that's created out of this, because it's not, people think campaign equals short term. Campaigns are short term efforts. Oftentimes they have a beginning and end date, but the content that you create, if you approach it correctly, can be evergreen and can be leveraged in your nurture streams and all these other types of opportunities, right? So I am a major recycling, upcycling, aholic, and I am constantly thinking about content and how it can be reused, repurposed, sliced and diced and, made into a million great things. And so if you start off thinking in that way, you can really, really simplify what it takes to execute on a campaign like this. And so you want to make sure that you've set your targets for the campaign in terms of meeting that objective. But you also, as a marketer, you need to understand those core tactics that you're going to choose. So for this campaign, for example, I chose a webinar, video, and a blog as kind of that core format that I was going to promote. And I wanted to make sure that I understood that those were the things we were going to really look at and hyper focus on. And so you set those out at the top so that though you can learn from your KPIs, right? Targets are things you're trying to achieve for the campaign. KPIs are what you're trying to obviously related to the campaign. They're your indicators of whether or not you're going to hit those targets, right? So they're interrelated, and you have to make sure that those are the things that are going to indicate the you're getting to the success rate. Email, I know a lot of us sometimes we're like, oh, but it's so, old fashioned. It is always going to be a fabulous channel and always a great indicator. And when it comes to bottom of the funnel, you already know who they are. You have their email. You don't need them to fill out a form, and no one wants to fill out a form. So, taking advantage of email is always a must when it comes to a bottom of the funnel channel. Step 5 and 6 is targeting your audience and setting that content strategy. So you can see over here, and again, you can take a look at these offline, that messaging of, you can save all sorts of money at a high level was already happening. And so, what we did is we thought, okay, how can we connect that high level message with this bottom level message? It's like, oh, well, let's look out here. And really it's the impact of, a network packet broker. You need to understand that before the conversation is even going to be meaningful at the bottom of the funnel. So you need to think about it in terms of what your what your funnel objectives are, but also think about what the journey is for the buyer. Because once you've set your objective in terms of the stage of the funnel, from then on, it becomes about giving your audience what they need and using related calls to action to help pull them through the funnel, right? So you give them something they need, a webinar, right? Like we're having right now. And at the end, they're like, wow, great. I definitely need some help. That sounds like just for me. And you say, please contact me. All of a sudden you've got a meeting, right? But that person didn't say, gosh, what I really need right now is a salesperson to talk to, right? But it's still the same outcome. You have the meeting, right? So aligning that intention of your buyer along with the intention you have as a business is the critical part to doing a full funnel approach. When you think about channels and promotion, you have to think about these things separate from the format and the message, right? So you have your message and it's designed at a specific place in the funnel, and you need to connect it to other messages, right? So as part of your plan, you need to think about where you're going to place your message, right? So for example, because this is a bottom of the funnel message, I don't need to necessarily connect, not necessarily, I don't need to connect that message with that high level message, with those high level channels or high level assets. What I do need to do though is think about that middle of the funnel and making sure, for example, in this example, that there is a way for on our website, when we're talking about something about network packet brokering, that we have this action on our website that takes that next step, right, to this, whatever it is, if it was a webinar that we were promoting or a blog or, etc. So, you have to think about how you're connecting to the other messages through your content calls to action. And it's a very, very, it can get really confusing. So have patience with yourself, and more importantly, have patience with the people you're working with, because the terminology and the words we use are so, they switch with each other so often that we can sometimes get confused. For example, you have the middle of the funnel, but you also have the middle of someone's journey, right? So they might be in the middle of their journey, but not ready for a middle of the funnel call to action yet. So these nuances get very, very, very detailed. And this is why you need to make sure that you're measuring to learn so that you can customize what you do to be most successful for your audience within the context of what you're trying to achieve. I have here in this little diagram, it's the diagram I had at the beginning, an outline of what it looks like when you take a core assets. As I mentioned, we had email and the webinar and the blog. Those were our core assets. And then everything else We're driving to those assets and interrelated. And you want to map that flow out in a way so that you really understand and can highlight for people the difference between a piece of content that is behaving as a lure to lure people in, a way of promoting people, versus a piece of content that is, the actual content itself. And oftentimes, something can serve dual purposes. You can have, for example, a blog, and you should, I did, a blog that embeds a videos into it, as well as even a registration page for a webinar, right? So these interdependencies become really complex and really fast, can grow. So you need to hone in on those ones that are the most important, and then only leverage the channels that are going to be appropriate for this specific audience and that specific task. Again, you're not going to do a television ad when you're talking about, getting someone at that bottom of the funnel. You will have had to, do a lot more work, and they would have to be ready to consume it, right? They have to be ready in terms of where they are in their journey. You need to quantify these things as well. And so you can see here in this example, I've got, those assets quantified, but you can also see that I have copy and graphic requirements as well. And so one of the things, as I mentioned, you want to do is make sure you're documenting everything, not just so you can get buy-in, but also so you can scope in terms of timing, resources, and, the actual things that need to happen. One of the ways that you need to do that is by making sure that you've got this very, very complete, robust, upfront document plan that you're working from. But if you don't have a structure for how you're going to actually work together with the different teams, it's going to all fall on you. And oftentimes, that means it won't get where it needs to go. It might get done, but it may not get the results you're looking for. And you're definitely not going to be able to do the types of and levels of things that we've outlined here. So I've got an example here of essentially a structure that I've designed in terms of how to kind of kick things off, and then how to keep them going and how to work together. Because you really do need to make sure that everyone has what they need to manage themselves independently, but that you have checks and balances along the way to make sure that if anybody falls down, as a team, you're able to pick them back up and make sure that things keep going. And so this framework here on the right is really designed to help do that. Excuse me. One of the things I recommend is really leveraging existing meetings as much as possible versus creating new ones. So, thinking about what it is that you need to achieve and who it needs to be with is the important thing. And so that's what you can see in this structure. This is one you can use. Most people already, there's some type of existing structure they have to play into. I think the important thing is really making sure that you're achieving all the things that you need to at these types of meetings so that they're working meetings and not just, informing people of things that you could frankly do in your project management tool or in email or voicemail or even sending videos. You need to be able to operationalize if you want to be able to move quickly. I've included here a high level outline of what it would take to do something like I designed here. And really what, each of these phases at a minimum, I mean, this is so fast. This is like all hands on deck. We already have the messaging. No one's going to resist. Everybody's right. Everybody's ready to go. These are the minimum amount of times that you would want to make sure you have here. And, again, 2 weeks planning and 3 weeks to begin begin executing. And so I have a launch date in here, and saying, from the beginning of planning, which is 2 weeks, and then beginning of executing is 6 weeks. So that means you need to have a minimum of 6 weeks to be able to launch a campaign. And again, that would be lightning fast. And really, that is to launch it, not to complete it. The diagram or schedule here I have on the right, you can see there's all this upfront work that has to be planned out and aligned. And in order to make something happen this quickly, you have to have processes in place that leverage things that you have done in that 2 weeks. You cannot skip it. You have to have 2 full weeks, or this ratio at least, right? I mean, you could see 3 weeks to execute, 2 whole weeks to plan. Yes. Because if you don't plan, you're not going to be able to execute that quickly, and you're not going to be able to leverage everyone to their fullest. And so you need to think about this in terms of getting to that launch date with the core assets and the key deliverable, and then iterating and adding, because the thing that you have to keep in mind is that our audience is not just in our little campaign, right? Their world is more robust and more full of information than we ever really can handle. And so we need to keep in mind, is Cisco Live happening this week? Might not be a good week to drop that activity, right? What are the other things that are happening in the other stages of the funnel that we should be connecting to, right? Does my campaign connect to Cisco Live, right? Thinking about all those things and factoring it in is where the schedule starts to get impacted. So this framework is based on, almost unreal in the sense of like having all hands on deck and being able to focus and having all the resources aligned. But because I did it, it is possible. So, this is another thing, as I mentioned, where planning and alignment and people, it's critical. So, if you can get that, you are, oh my gosh, you're almost guaranteed to have some form of success if you're going with that. The other aspect, as I mentioned, is making sure you have the framework and the tools to be able to, it's measure measure, twice, cut once, right? So the other aspect is thinking about this in terms of your reuse and how all these different channels, all these different assets, all these different people need the same thing, right? And so if you don't have a copy kit that you can leverage, create a copy kit that has every single element you need. And if you don't know what it is that you need and when you need it, create a bill of materials. And I've got a screenshot in here you can see of a bill of materials where you're outlining all those different elements, all those different things that you need to be able to execute. And make sure that you're including all the things outside of yourself and outside of your immediate team. If you're going to need graphic support, you're going to need, a landing page, you're going to need social, right? All these different things, you need to make sure that you've got those teams aligned and committed to be able to do this together in a sequenced way. Even though the journey is not linear, you still have to execute in a sequenced way. You can skip around, you can, do different things, but, you definitely need to have that copy before you can promote something. You've got to have the asset before you can use the channel, right? So thinking about how you're going to do that is one of the most critical pieces to making sure that you're aligned, but also making sure that you can use a single resource to do all the writing for your campaign, which I highly recommend. Thinking about different ways you can leverage outside resources, especially for, things that are like writing, right? So it's like you have a writer or you have, a vendor that, can do some type of writing. You want to leverage that person to do all the writing, whether it's the blog, the scripts. And when I say scripts, I also mean scripts for sales. If it's a bottom of the funnel, you're going to have emails for sales to use in their emails. You're going to have scripts for them to call. People still call. We know this. We get those calls. You're going to need all sorts of different things. So speccing all that out in advance is why you need 2 weeks of planning. It's why you need to be able to do all of this, because then you have one intake meeting with whoever's going to be doing all the writing. They get all the major copy elements done, and you can take that and you can leverage that for translation or regionalizing, campaign in a box for your channel, right? I mean, it becomes something that is so, so worth the investment. And also, again, to do a timeline, like I mentioned before, it's a critical requirement. It's a prerequisite. That, and then also obviously having those product marketing resources and other resources that are just absolutely critical to getting the messaging right, and selecting the right channels. You're also going to need to make sure that, you have everyone committed. And I really, really want to emphasize this. When I say committed, I mean committed at each of these critical stages, but committed to the process, and committed to each other. And understand that if this is a brand new activity, that, there are already things happening. Everyone needs to think about what are the things that might need to stop in order for this to happen effectively, or what are the things that we need to change, right? So there's a lot of collaboration and partnership that's required throughout the organization to really make sure that this execution, by the time you get to execution, it's easy, right? Because then it's just everybody go do what you do by this time, and raise your hand if you're running any challenges, so we can all pitch in and make sure that we're all successful together. When you're measuring, as I mentioned earlier, you want to really make sure that you're thinking about what are the things that you are going to learn. And I actually like to start with questions, So, what is it that I want to know? What's that question I want answered? And then I check myself. Okay, Heather, do you need to know that, or are you just curious? Right? Because sometimes we just are curious about things because it's interesting and we want to measure it. But really, everything takes energy, everything takes a resource, everything takes time, but also everything creates noise for yourself and for others. So to keep clear and focused, you also need to think up front, okay, what is it that I really need to know? And once I know it, what am I going to be able to do with that information? And is that important right now? Because again, you can get lost in the data, and really depending upon where you're focusing on the funnel, you really need to make sure that your metrics are aligned to that. So for example, I'm not going to be doing any brand studies for a bottom of the funnel campaign, right? I'm going to be focusing on my channels, on my calls to action, and on those KPIs and those targets I set in the beginning around SQOs and meetings, and then learn from there. Now, again, this is from a campaign perspective. Program managers, the channel managers, people who are managing the social channels, managing platforms. When I managed a webinar program, in addition to executing them as a campaign manager, I had engine room metrics and other things that I needed to be looking at that were different. And then also, quite bluntly, some organizations still love their vanity metrics. And if you can't get your organization to buy in without a vanity metric, then give them the vanity metric. Like, you need the support and the buy-in, and it's better to give them what they need to help you, even if that's not what you need, right? So keep your audience in mind the whole time, whether it's the audience you're targeting or the audience of who you're working with. If everyone is hyper focused on the same goal and has that same level of clarity, it's magic. It's wonderful, and it's fun. Is the other aspect. It really is. I feel like everyone really enjoyed when we worked on this campaign together. And as I mentioned, my apologies. I just realized I hadn't clicked forward. As I mentioned, this was something that triggered other campaigns as well, right? So that's the other thing I would say, is that if you're struggling with, you've been doing it, you're bought in, but you maybe can't get the rest of the organization, find something that will help them understand and make the aha light bulb go on. And that was another reason I picked this particular campaign at the time when they were my client. I wanted them to understand what it was to do something like this in that environment. And so it really can be a way to transform. So have patience with yourself and your organization. The first one you do that's kind of taking this new type of approach, you're going to learn from that. It may not be as easy at the organization you're at. It may be easy somewhere else. Everywhere is so contextual that you really do have to change your approach and your style to how you accomplish this, depending upon that environment that you're in. When you're looking at your metrics and you're doing your reporting, make sure that you are leveraging outside reports, not just your internal resources. One of the things that was extremely powerful and helpful for me when I leveraged ActualTech Media is their pair report. And what it does is it, just gave me the key information I needed to understand about the webinar. And then it was something I was able to leverage with my speaker and with the team, but also when I was managing the webinar program and doing the campaigns, I could look at it from a success metric perspective of how well did they do to each other, right? Because when you're looking at your data, you want to make sure that you're looking at things, in a normalized way as much as possible. So if, you have a webinar that's attended by one person, never, or you have a webinar that's attended by 1,000 people, the number of questions that come up or the number of, live attendees or all those different numbers are contextual to each other, right? So you can't just say, oh, only one person asked a question and say that was awful. If you have one attendee and one, that's 100%. Right? So really take a time and look at things from, a volume perspective, a value perspective, and a velocity perspective, right? So, what's the quantity? What's the value of things, and then how fast is it happening? So, if I have a webinar that's, got 50% of the people who attended live asked a question, that's more exciting than saying I had 10 questions. So, it's not just more exciting, but it's also more informative and useful, and you can act on it. So think about how you can leverage all the reporting you have, and you may need to actually take those metrics, combine them, right? Like the vendor report with the information I have on my side of the world, and make a new metric that's contextual to your campaign and your organization that helps demonstrate what you've accomplished and where the success is and where those breakdowns might be. So I want you all to remember that full funnel integrated marketing campaigns require that you have a contextual messaging hierarchy that is based on the audience, what they need, and when they need it, right? And that you have a content strategy that aligns to their journey, and that you're focused on providing value, not getting what you need, but providing them what they need so that you get what you need. You give them a most valuable webinar, and then they get what they need so they can go, oh, now I understand. Now I know I need that next thing. I'm ready to talk to someone. The thing that blew my mind about ActualTech webinars from a B2B tech marketer perspective was the amount of people that actually wanted to hear from us and said, yes, please call me. Yes, please reach out to us. That's like gold, right? So you want to get to those kinds of things, and it has to be the right match and the right mix, and you have to measure it and learn and keep working it, right? But you cannot do that if you're not focused on connecting the goal and your message to a content strategy and delivering it through those channels that are going to actually reach the people, right? Again, you've got to make sure that people actually find what it is that you're looking for. And it's much better to put your bait in the water where the fish are than to try and build a lake and somehow get them to jump into it. So, your channels or your lakes, think about how you can use them well. But if you're not putting the right bait in there, you're not doing the right lure, and you don't have a salesperson who's ready to reel it in, none of the things I talked about mattered. Right? So really get the commitment from your organization to approach it in this full funnel connected way. Get all the teams and all the departments, especially sales and your business development reps, to be able to, if you're pitching the ball, you want them to be able to catch it or hit it or whatever the analogy is today that I want to use. And, just start talking to each other and getting on the same page about where it is that you can come together to help your audience. And you'll see that all these things start to really come and fall into place. So, if you don't have the support, you cannot be successful. And, it starts with you, and then it goes to your leadership, the people you work with, the resources, etc. So, follow these 10 steps in this general approach. And I think you'll find that you'll have quite a bit of success. So let me ask you, how prepared do you feel to build an integrated marketing campaign based on all the things that we just talked about? Let's do a little poll here and see, do you feel prepared, or do you feel like you really need help? Do you feel like you got it, but help would be great? Or, yeah, I'm like a pro, I don't need any help, even though help's always nice. I'm good. I think that, there's a lot of us that find ourselves in various aspects of our journey. And some of us are in a situation right now where if we had our old teams or if we had all the budget or we had all the things we had, sure, it'd be great. But I think a lot of us, we really do need each other. And so I wanted to share the results. And it looks like, oh, that's great. A lot of you are really, really prepared. Love it. I hope this has given you some extra information. I think, even when you feel prepared, sometimes it helps to have things like this to help you help others on your own teams and in the organization, to get behind you and help you do what you need to do for the business. And, I think it's really, really great that everyone's feeling like they're prepared. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to share my knowledge and my expertise and to offer up my services. If you have anything that you need in terms of, helping to, whether it's fine tuning something you're already doing, looking at ways that you can do it better, starting from scratch, just a coaching session, strategic advisory, just, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this? Any of those types of things, reach out to me. I'd love to chat and help as many marketers as I can. What we do is super awesome and fun, but it's also really, really challenging and really difficult, and it can get tough. So it's wonderful that we have such an awesome community, and pleasure to be a part of it, and grateful to ActualTech Media for allowing me to be here today. So Geordie, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Heather, and thank you so much for the awesome presentation. If you need help, please reach out to Heather. She's amazing. On a consulting basis, she'll be able to assist you. If you just want to talk shop, whatever it is, by all means, hit her up and get the assistance you need. And we're here to help you at ActualTech Media too, right? So all of the pieces that Heather talked about that go into an integrated marketing campaign, we're able to help with most of those pieces. The content you'll need, she talked about a consistent writer, all of those things across your campaign. We can do all that for you. The audio, the video, we can work with you on to get beautiful assets that you can use in those channels. The webinars, the lead gen, syndication, everything that you need to make those pieces come together. If we can make it easier for you to execute on your campaign, we're there to be in your corner. So just a little plug there for us. We had to do it. But so let's talk about questions. We'll do, we got to do this pretty rapid fire here, Heather, but we've got some nice ones. So one of the things is, what are your tips for getting sales buy-in for them to get on board with executing on what you're bringing in?
Yes, no, it's a great question. It's a great question. I mean, really, I think you have to understand them. You have to already be listening and participating and getting to know them personally if you have the opportunity. I think, that's one of the biggest challenges, is just creating that relationship so that you're getting what you need. Because, if you just ask the question, what do you need, salespeople? Oh, we need trade shows. We need, collateral. We do it, right? This the same answers is not helpful. So, really instead ask them what their challenges are. Try to understand them. So ask them questions that will help you understand them, not questions that answer your questions. I think that is the most important thing. And when you start approaching it from that perspective, you'll start getting information that will then you'll go, oh, okay, now I need to ask this question, right? So you get that dialogue going. Regular, listening and communication is really the only way to begin not just begin, but also maintain that relationship and that alignment. Take their trainings, read their materials. You don't have to become a salesperson, but you need to understand one if you want to be able to align with them. It's, again, I don't even play sports. I don't know why I use these analogies, I guess just business analogies, but like, pitchers know how to hit and, hitters know how to pitch, right? Like, but they play their role and they play it well. But the ones that know what each other needs, those are the teams that win, right? So that's my biggest
Yeah.
advice there. And I would also say, focus on helping them be better at what they do, not doing what you need them to do.
And maybe even listening in on sales calls too, recordings and things like that,
Always.
especially for the BDRs, to hear what the BDRs are experiencing when they're calling out.
Yes,
That could
it,
be
it,
helpful
it is
too.
really, really helpful. And I don't know if anyone has used Vidyard or things like that, but sales folks now are leveraging video to do things like that. If they're doing that, then find out, get access. You can watch the videos that they're sending people, things like that.
Mm.
Any way that you can see the real deal in action, that's also going to give you a lot of insight for sure. But also understand the
So,
funnel and the numbers. If you're not in the demand team, you go talk to them. Look at spreadsheets. Look at look at, Power BI or, any of those kinds of tools that are going to show you what they're looking at, so that you really do
yeah,
understand what winning together looks like.
awesome. So let's say that we want to do this, but we have to prioritize because we can't do everything that's on our campaign laundry list of our materials list of what we want to do. How do you prioritize which pieces are essential?
That's great. Um, I think that, you have to start, if you think about separate your message from the format and align the format to the channel, right? Meaning, let's say you have a bottom of the funnel message that you're focusing on. Okay. Then you have to think about where you're going to find those people, right? So I'm going to use that fishing analogy again. So, I want to fish for, catfish. They're at the bottom of the lake, right? Not all things are going to catch that fish, right? They're not in all lakes. Also, I might need to go there at night okay, I'm embarrassing myself now. Yes, my brother took me catfishing at night and it was awful. And I had to use chicken livers and it was scary. But, these are the things that, you need to understand your fish if you want to catch them, right?
Yeah.
So like really, I think that is the critical piece, is really thinking about it from, what is the message I'm trying to communicate and where are they going to be ready to hear that message? So again, to use ActualTech
Mhm.
media in this campaign, where they're on these multi-vendor calls, where people are presenting demos. Like if somebody's watching a demo on a webinar, they're ready to talk to someone. They might not have the information they need to be ready. And that's what the webinar does. It doesn't just give them a demo, it gives them the information that they need, the message they need to make them go, oh, that's why I need to talk to a salesperson.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think this next question, the final question is how to, obviously there's SMEs that are going to be needed from your team in order to make some of these pieces work. Like they
Yeah.
just, and their time is super strapped. Any tips on how you can get SMEs to give you what you need so you can be successful?
Yes. So this is another one of the benefits of having a campaign kit that includes a copy kit. Because what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to have I picked one writer. They're going to write everything. They're going to work with the product marketing person. We're going to have an intake meeting with the product marketing person. We send them all the messaging, all the stuff in advance. We have that meeting, we record it so that it's there for a reference for any other writers or anyone else who needs it. And we make sure that that writer is a, proxy for the SME, in the sense that if they
Mhm.
needed to, they could ghostwrite anything. They may not be ghostwriting. They may not be doing that, but they have an understanding of the topic and the messaging and the objectives. You have to brief them, right,
Mhm.
on what you're trying to achieve and all these types of things. The biggest thing I had to do that I didn't realize was helping the writer understand that the content they were giving me was to promote content most of the time, not to promote our business, right? So the social media copy I need for the webinar is to promote the webinar, not to promote us. So you
Mhm.
don't write about the solution. You write about what they're going to learn at the webinar, not what the solution is going to give them, right? And those kinds of variables were very make a big difference. So if you can get things oriented around the subject matter expert has already probably created a messaging framework or something. They have some kind of something. If not, have a meeting, record it, get it from them, interview them, throw something on a document and say, does this work? So they can edit and go, oh no, let me tell you how that's wrong. Next thing you know, you've got what you need, right? So focus on getting what you need in the most efficient way possible, as much as possible upfront in that planning stage, so that you don't have to keep going back to the SMEs and you don't have to ask them to do things that other people can do. So for example,
Okay.
if you have a
Well,
copy kit,
oh,
you
sorry.
don't need to have the person writing the blog. If it's not the SME, go back to that SME to write the blog. They go to the copy kit.
Yeah, it's good not to have to go back to the well. Well, thank you so much, Heather. This was amazing. We do have to draw a prize. We know everybody's probably
Oh,
heading out if they're on the Pacific Coast for lunch. So our prize winner is Olivia W. from Colorado. So congratulations, Olivia. We'll be in touch with your gift card as well. So thank you so much for everybody for attending today. We hope this was helpful. Grab the presentation, reach out to Heather, and get the help you need to execute on your integrated marketing campaigns. There is an exit survey. Please fill it in if you'd be so kind, and we look forward to your feedback. So
yes.
thanks
Let us
again,
know what
everybody.
you
Have
want
a
to
great one.
learn. I want to know what more you want to know.
Exactly. What more can we help with? Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.